The Democratic Party is not equipped to fight fascism. They're just not. They are a Marquise de Queensberry rules party. They are a rules-based entity. They're great at the mechanics of government. They're great at creating Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, Obamacare. But the challenge that Democrats have always had, each of those important things has only been able to be enacted when Democrats had their own version of a political strongman, a charismatic leader who could force those things through. But Democrats right now don't have that. They don't have a charismatic leader. And Democrats, for whatever reason, need leaders. And the young charismatic leaders like Jasmine Crockett and AOC, they don't want them in the lead because they are a turns-based party. And they're saying it's not their turn. And so therefore they can't be the leader because they also don't follow our rules. And so because they're so rules-based, they can't fight fascism because they just want to do it within the context of regular politics.
This is Black Man Spy. Welcome to this week's edition of Black Man Spy. I'm Malcolm Nance. I am the proverbial Black Man Spy, whose podcast you're listening to or watching. We have a great guest today, a good friend of mine, someone who I worked with for almost 6 years at MSNBC, the famous Joy Ann Reid, former host of AM Joy on MSNBC, and she was also host of the Joy Reid Show in primetime. But now she has been rehomed to YouTube, where she is amongst the political elite who are now commenting outside the bounds of corporate news media. She has her own show, the Joy Reid Show, which runs every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday on YouTube. And without any further pause, please, I'd like to introduce you and start the interview of our twice NAACP Image Award, Emmy-nominated journalist, geopolitical analyst, and definitely the smartest person I know on the machinations of the Trump administration, Joy Reid. Joy Reid, welcome to this special maple leaf flavored Canadian-based version of Black Man Spy. And you know, the funny thing is, I just came back from Greenland, where right after the U.S. had released stories that they were sending spies to Greenland. So I get there, the first thing everybody asks is, "Hey, are you the spy?" I go, "No."
Yes. And I'm telling you that because I'm a spy who tells you what I'm doing.
I'm the good spy. I'm here, and we're going to talk more about that. But now I'm in Canada, and you know, I'm on the Canadian side. Oh, very nice here in Quebec. I'm just outside Montreal, in the Laurentian Mountains, which is just full of lakes, like every 10 seconds. I think I went running this morning and I ran by 3 different lakes. It's just awesome.
Well, you know, in The Handmaid's Tale, Canada is the refuge from Gilead.
I know.
Keep it in mind when I'm outside your door begging to stay.
It's the first scene. The thing is, I go back and forth, so I'm not here all the time. So we have people who already want to come up and get out. And I told the realtor, I said, you could start your own business called Elegant Asylum. You rent these places, and then the people come from Gilead. So with that, let's talk seriously, because it's not like the world isn't on fire or anything. I will refrain from starting it the way I started with Michael Steele last week, which was a rousing WTF. All right. I would just ask you, Joy, what the hell? Did you ever, based on anything that we ever predicted, all of our talk, think that things would get this bad this far in America?
I think I'm not surprised that it's gotten this bad, to be honest with you. No, I'm surprised by the speed with which it's gotten this bad.
Right.
You and I, back in our AM Joy days, if you will recall, were consistently saying you cannot give a man like Donald Trump power because he is a fascist. And if you give a fascist power, they will use it to make themselves into a dictator. Now, we've been saying that for years and years and years. No one wanted to hear it. No one
Yes.
believed it, right? But we said it, and we were thought of as insane. We were told we were hysterical, that we were overdoing it, that we were impertinent, cruel, you name it. We were dumb. We were everything. Now it's happening, and people are like, oh, holy crap, it's fascism. Yes, we told you. And here's the difference between Trump then and Trump now. Trump in 2016 was a clown who had handlers. And the handlers of the clown were people like General Mattis, people like General Mark Milley, even John Kelly, who I'm not a fan of, General John Kelly, a right-wing general, but who's an American, a patriotic, American. He had even people like Rex Tillerson, not a fan, but Rex Tillerson is a serious person. And so even when he hired and put people in his administration because he liked the way they looked, he liked them on TV or whatever, they were actually serious people. And you had people behind the scenes who were also constraining his crazy and forcing him to behave like a normal president, at least sometimes. Now, Donald Trump is fully unhinged, and he is surrounded only by sycophants, clowns, cartoon characters, and fools. And there's nobody, there are no Mattises, there is no Mark Milley, there are no serious people. It's Tulsi Gabbard, who's too crazy for him. It's Pete Hegseth, the biggest joke who's ever been defense secretary. I'm embarrassed as an American that that's our defense secretary. I'm fully embarrassed, Marco Rubio, who I keep telling y'all, if it's up to Marco Rubio to save you, you're already dead. It's a saying they say in Florida. He has no conscience, no principles except ambition.
Let's talk about that real quick, because I really didn't give it a lot of thought. I just thought this is a man that cares nothing about any principle he has ever stood on. Are these people all, psychopaths? I mean, he doesn't have any empathy. Remember the way he used to talk so fulsomely about Cuba and about Ukraine, and really was supposedly a serious foreign policy player. And now he's sitting in the seats of Thomas Jefferson, right? And I mean, he stinks of, incompetence and regret. But worse, the regret is, it's like those movies where you have the scratch track and the narrator says, but it's not going the way that he wanted it to go. And he's sitting there thinking, man, I could have been president. I could have run for president. But now we're finding out his character was so dangerously ambitious. Ted Cruz levels of psychopathy, but he keeps his mouth shut, right? Which is even worse. I'd rather have a psychopath that tells me what he's up to. But Ted Cruz levels of ambition, but will betray anyone and anything in any stand he ever had before for the adoration, the glow of the worshipers of Donald Trump. Explain that. Please try to make that make sense.
And you know what? And it's almost an insult to Ted Cruz, because Ted Cruz is a weakling. He's a simp. He's an authoritarian stooge, just like Rubio is. But Ted Cruz actually believes in something. Ted Cruz is a Dominionist. In his interview with another one of the people I really dislike and hate agreeing with, Tucker Carlson,
we're jumping ahead,
right? He exposed himself as a full-on Dominionist. He said that he came into office in 2014 for the main purpose of supporting Israel. That was his main purpose, not supporting the people of Texas, not supporting the United States, Israel. And then he said the reason that it's even okay if Israel spies on us is because in the Bible, and he couldn't even tell you what verse, but he knows somewhere in the Bible, it says that those who bless Israel will be blessed and those who curse Israel will be cursed. And he thinks that the current Israel, the current country, is the exact same thing as the Israel in the Bible. He's a Dominionist.
Really?
But Rubio doesn't even have that level of ideological commitment.
Mm.
Marco Rubio believes in nothing. He's been a Catholic, he's been a Mormon, he's been an evangelical. He's whatever religion works for him in the moment, and he's also whatever ideology works for him in the moment. He's been a Bush-style Republican. He's been a supposed Tea Partier, which is the opposite of a Bush-style Republican. He's been for Ukraine, doesn't give a crap about Ukraine. He's been hard on Russia. He doesn't care if Russia is dominating the earth. He doesn't believe in anything. He thought Donald Trump was a small penis weakling, and now he thinks Donald Trump is God. Marco Rubio believes in nothing, but he doesn't even have the intellectual heft of a Ted Cruz, who's barely got any. He's got less. So he couldn't even be president. And I have always said this man will never be president because he doesn't believe in anything. Neither does Trump. At least Trump has the talent of performance. He doesn't even have that. Marco Rubio is doing what he's doing now because in his mind, he thinks that somehow he can inherit the cult of Donald Trump. That when Trump is aged out and when the devil takes him home, when he goes back below from whence he came, when the creature to which he has sold his soul takes him, he thinks that he will inherit that cult. They all think it. They think they can inherit the cult. What they don't understand is that when Jim Jones was gone, there was no other Jim Jones. There was only one Jim Jones. And when he killed all those people in the forests of Guyana, even his son could not become the next Jim Jones because cults are sui generis. They worship one person, not even God. They worship one God. And these people are a monotheistic cult. And the God is named Donald Trump.
Really? So, I know I'd intended to start with the general geopolitics of the world, but no, this is important. These facets of understanding, certainly from your perspective, you're one of the top political analysts in the United States. The very fact that you got fired, or let me rephrase that, reassigned to the civilian world.
Rehomed.
Rehomed. Yes. The MSNBC
I got rehomed to YouTube.
The NBC studio Gaithers. Wait, you're down in Maryland, right? So, but the very fact that you can frankly say what we all understand, which is true. I mean, there's a certain thing that I think that a lot of people in the white community don't understand about the Black community. Why that devil takes him home comment made me cry with laughter, because the hard truth of it is ground over centuries of watching these people gain advantage simply because they are characters, they are players, and they can be openly blatant, horrible charlatans and gain a following. I hearken back to one of my favorite book. I would arguably say my favorite book, which is the Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. And towards the end of the book, he meets these two con artists, right, who are going around claiming that one is the King of England and the other is the Dauphin of France, right? And everybody believes him, right?
Yeah.
And to the point where, and Huckleberry Finn realizes if I hitch my star to these guys, if I hang around with these guys, I'll just take in the rubes, we'll eat well, and then boom, Tom Sawyer pops back up, and he sees the genius of white people lying to each other. The genius of it. Even Tom Sawyer was impressed, right? And if you argue that Tom Sawyer is the conscience of Mark Twain, right, and Huckleberry Finn is just the narrator of how horrible people are, and that Jim himself, like all African Americans on the outside, recognize insanity and stupidity when we see it, because just the shared nature of our existence. It just harks to why I find it so fascinating that people like JD Vance, who I'm going to ask you about next, because you do know these people at a level that no one else can really know. Had you interviewed JD Vance?
On AM Joy, same show you used to be on all the time.
Yeah.
And we had him on. When
Oh,
Hillbilly
geez.
Elegy first came out, I reached out to my team at William Morris at WME and said, "Hey, you guys, I think you guys represent this guy because everyone's trying to book him. He was a hard booking, and so we managed to get him." And I interviewed him. This is when he was chubby, when he didn't have his facial hair, which I think he thinks makes him look cool.
Oh yeah,
True.
that's a MAGA thing,
Right.
right?
And when he was pretending
The
to be a
dude,
decent human being.
the vet bro beard.
Yeah. And,
He's
you know,
pretending to be a human
he was
being.
pretending. And I know now that it was a pretense because his behavior during the campaign, I thought was more reprehensible in many ways than Trump's, because his attacks on Vice President Harris were so vile, so guttural, so gut-wrenching, that it made, to me, him unqualified morally and in terms of character to be Vice President of the United States. I thought what he said, calling her trash 4 days before the election, I will never forgive, nor will I forget. But yeah, when we had him on AM Joy, he was still a pudgy little chubber who was telling about his book. And he claimed that the thesis of the book, and I had read, I try to read the books before they come on, but in this case, we were so full of like wacky, like stuff going on, then Trump stuff, that I only got through about the first like third of it. So I read about a third of it. I'd read it before he got to the part where he basically slams his own people, Appalachians, as lazy, useless fools. But the first part is not yet a diss track. In the beginning, it sounds like a love letter. And then it shifts into a diss track later in the book. Once I then, after the interview, I read the rest of the book, I'm like, ooh, this is rough on white poor people. It was basically a haterism on white poor folks. But what he was saying in the interview, and the interview still exists online, is that there are pathologies in the white community that mirror the pathologies that are claimed to exist within the Black community, meaning in the white community, there is a shallow work ethic. There is a desire to get federal assistance and financial assistance from the government, and that there is a dependency on those things in the white community, and also in his own telling, rampant drug abuse and pain and want. And that is true. There is a lot of pain, want, and drug abuse within the white poor community, which is larger than the Black poor community. The majority of poor folks in America are white. They're in Appalachia, and they're in the places he claims to come from. And those people need government assistance. Those people actually could benefit from some federal help, but he kind of shames them for it, rather than admitting that this is a failure of our society, that poor people, white and Black, can't make it in the richest country on earth. So he has a lack of empathy for his own people. And he's also a liar. This man at the time, back before, when he was at Yale and he was friends with trans people, and he was sort of cosplaying as a normal, sort of liberalish Ivy Leaguer, he pretended that his reason for getting into public life was to sort of help those people, right? But it turns out he just wanted to be rich, and he hooked up with Peter Thiel and decided to just make a buck. And he made a buck and then became a senator, and now I think he's ripped the veil off and he's his real self. But yeah, I don't have a great deal of respect for JD Vance, if I'm being honest, or whatever his name is. I think he's been John, Donald, James, David, whatever the hell his name is.
Three different names,
Yeah,
3 different names. Well, that explains a lot. So, how do you explain that he killed the Pope? No, I'm just joking.
When I tell you, listen, let me tell you something. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, okay? I'm not. Well, I'm not often, but let me tell you something.
On occasion.
Listen, I was only Catholic till I was 6, and then we switched to low ceiling church because me and my sister was a little noisy in Latin church, okay? So my mom was like, ooh, let's go to a church with a low ceiling. You're now Methodists. But I'm still fascinated with the Catholic Church, and I loved the previous Pope, who we just nicknamed Pontifex, because he cared so much for the poor. He was such a real, what Catholics should be. That man, literally within hours of his own death, confronts someone who is essentially prostituting the theology of Christ, who has claimed that the Bible claims that we're supposed to care for our family first and only then the people in the community. It doesn't say that. He had to correct his false theology, which is a theology of selfishness. It is the philosophy of Peter Thiel that is masquerading as Christianity. those of us who grew up in the church, whether we were Catholic or Protestant or whatever, if you actually read the Bible, you understand that it is care for the poor and the immigrant that is primary in the mind of God, in the mind of Jesus, right? If you believe Jesus, the voice of God and the Son of God, that's what he believed. For this man to publicly state that the real philosophy of Jesus is to not care for the immigrant, to just care for your own people, to be selfish. This gospel of selfishness is apostasy. And I think that he knew he was coming to his end. I do believe this. I think that the Pope had a spiritual sense. And I think that he could feel that his time was coming to an end. And he decided, I'm going to go ahead and have this meeting. I didn't really want to meet with this not a genuine Catholic or believer, but I'm going to speak truth to wickedness. And I think he used his last hours to speak truth to wickedness. We don't know what he said to him.
Wow.
But I think he looked in the eye of wickedness and met it on his way to glory.
Wow, that is an amazing take. And now it makes a lot of sense. I mean, it makes a lot of sense. It also makes a lot of sense that the new Pope called his ass in and read him the riot act.
You mean the black
on the
Pope?
carpet. Yeah, the black Pope. That's right. That's right. Creole blood in there. I find that fascinating because we now have this trend of where I suspect that JD Vance, when he was quote unquote Catholic, I was raised Catholic from go, right? And I've been around, and I've read the Jesus' Owner's Manual, and pretty sure none of the things that we're doing is going to get any longevity out of this car we call Christianity. But the new Pope hauling him in and essentially reading him the riot act and dropping hints left and right, and which popes didn't do. Recently they tried to be apolitical, but now the embrace and the almost unanimous conclave, it was just like, oh yeah, that guy's Pope. All right. And I know some people in the United States that aren't going to like this, right? It's like the entire conclave said, oh, we're choosing an American Pope, all right, who's going to remind all of you of this Jesus Christ guy and what he really stood for. And the funny thing is, I had just watched Conclave, and just watched it and thought, oh, the machinations of this, the dirtiness of this. No, this guy was the unanimous Pope.
Yeah.
What did they take, like a day?
Yeah.
Or something like that? Usually it takes forever, right? And they have to go through all of those formal bouts of voting. And this one, obviously, it was like 2 bouts of voting. And, and they said, okay, let's hold it back a day. We could all have lunch. But I found this fascinating, that the world's Christianity, the Christian movement, which I personally thought when they said, oh, they elected an American Pope, we were going to go back to the Pope during Nazi Germany, right? Someone who was going to become an enabler of the worst whims of a Christian church that was now going to embrace corporatism and, which supported Mussolini, which gave tacit support to Hitler against Judaism. And I was floored that not this world, not this Pope. I thought this is the first real lash back against the global wave of fascism that we're seeing, which I wrote in my book, Plot to Destroy Democracy. I called the axis of autocracy. Where Putin was going to control the Eastern Hemisphere, the United States, the Western Hemisphere, Asia would be China. They would make these new poles of the world. And that the world would not be able to withstand this. And then they would go country by country, which they're still trying to do. But Trump was designed to be that rigid pole in the Western Hemisphere to lock in Putin, Xi, and himself into these 3 separate poles that would get rid of liberal democracy around the world. And I think that this, the new Pope is a lashback in a large way to come back and say all of those downtrodden people, they're not talking to Trump.
Right.
They're talking to all of the global South.
Yeah.
Right? All of Latin America, all of sub-Saharan Africa. Wow, that's a fascinating take on it. I didn't intend to go there at all, but I don't think anyone's talking about it.
I don't think anybody's talking about it. And I think about, these two popes, Francis, who named himself after a prior pope whose primary purpose is caring for the poor and the immigrant. And literally wrapped into, he said, I am an immigrant. He was his family immigrated to South America from Italy, I believe. And he said, I'm an immigrant. He's like, I was embraced as an immigrant. And so Pope Francis, was very demonstrably moving the church back in favor of Jesus's red letters. And now you have Pope Leo, who did the same thing. He's like, I'm going to name myself after the Pope who admonished the West for slavery.
Yeah.
I'm going to wrap myself in that tradition, and I'm going to speak truth to the Americans who are bastardizing Christianity, and I'm going to say it in English. I'm going to say it in Chicago accented English, baby. He's not going to have to translate what I say to him. When I speak to JD Vance, he gonna understand what I'm saying because I'm from Chicago and my people are from New Orleans, and I embrace my heritage. And my I was told his great grandfather used to hang with Mark Morial's great grandfather. They used to roll tobacco together. So he's a whole Creole. And now Trump has to deal with it and not a translated version of the truth. And he's gonna speak that truth. And I have to say, those polls that you talk about in creating this axis of autocracies, I gotta put Israel in there. Israel is behaving.
Well, I thought when I wrote my last book, I thought Netanyahu was going down because I had Turkey, Israel, Egypt, all of these strong men rise up. Orban in Hungary. Now we've got the Slovaks, Serbia, and when they're popping up hard now. And this isn't whack-a-mole. When they come up, they're up, and they have support from all the other autocrats.
That's right. And I mean,
so you're saying Israel
all over the world, right? El Salvador's got what they call the world's coolest dictator. Argentina's got one. Poland just got rid of theirs. Hungary's got one. You've got Modi in India. You've got Netanyahu, who's been prime minister for 15 years and is now attempting to place himself atop the region as essentially the hegemon in the region and trying to brush aside Iran and Saudi Arabia to make himself the hegemon in that region. And he is, Bill Clinton has said it, he intends to be prime minister for life. He intends to stay out of jail, get out of his problems. He is going to, he will not, and I think what he thinks he's going to deliver to the religious fundamentalists who have given him power is genocide. He is going to remove every Palestinian from that land, put those settlers back in Gaza, take the settlers and give them all of the West Bank. And that's what he thinks he's buying, because he's not religious, but he's going to give that to his radical followers. But this man is now forcing us into a war, dragging us. And I don't even know why, because we ain't in a war with Iran. Why are we involved in this? Because Bibi said so. I'm afraid that Trump is a strong man, but he's a strong man junior. He makes himself junior to stronger strongmen, whether it is Putin or whether it is Bibi. And for whatever reason, he's not the big daddy strongman. He's the baby strongman who gets led around by other strongmen.
Every Thursday, I do a Substack podcast with Michael Cohen and Lev Parnas, two guys who know Trump intimately, right? Work with them. And I call it, we call it Unleashed, but I actually call it Two Felons and a Spy. And I get the greatest information out of these two about the weirdest angles of Trump's behavior. And they both called this weeks ago. They said, Netanyahu is going to put Trump in a box. And the one thing Trump cannot stand, he will do anything to avoid it, is being made to look like a weak junior partner. And Netanyahu, by attacking Iran 4 days before Trump's, I'm going to get a Nobel Prize for making a deal with Iran, right? What I call the, not the old Obama's JCPOA, but the Trump CPOA, right? The whitewashed version of it. Netanyahu wasn't playing that game, but he understands the psyche of Donald Trump, the way Putin understands it. And he goes, I'm just going to put him in a position where he will have to attack Iran. Because if he doesn't, he's going to come off as weak. And if he does, we're going to praise him as the new, great, strong man, American leader who has saved Israel, right? And that will help with his Jewish base. That will solidify him in the history of Israeli history. And 3 2, 1. Boom, we hit them. And I knew we were just going to have to hit them. Interestingly, the places that the Israelis said they could not penetrate were Fordus, part of Nance, and Isfahan. And it's almost like they left us this target set. I mean, as soon as I heard, I go,
Almost.
that's interesting. Wow, those 3 targets that only B-2 bombers can get. I see what's going
Right.
on here. And they were like, oh, well, Trump had to. The minute Trump did his 2 weeks thing, Lev Parnas comes out and he goes, he's hitting them right away. He's hitting them right away. I saw, by the way, I don't want to brag here. I've done a bunch of things this year where I've been over bragging. I saw the feint when those B-2s took off out of Whitman. Okay, there was already a whole fleet of tankers across the Atlantic. And I said, no one's flying to Guam West, right? They'd be going to Guam. I said, no, it won't come into the window. It won't come into the strike window. And then when we saw the tankers going east, I said, they're attacking. They're flying straight from Kansas. They had 6 of them in Diego Garcia, and they all went back. And so that was a cute little ploy. I'm certain that wasn't anything Pete Hegseth came up with, right? That was the Joint Chiefs are like, listen, OSINT people are watching. But that being said, it put Trump inside a box. And now Trump's in a bigger box because, full disclosure, I fought the Iranians in 1988. I'm one of the few people in the U.S. military or retired to ever go into direct combat with the Iranians in 1988. They almost killed us. They missed my ship by 150 feet, but we slaughtered them. We wiped them out. The Iranians learned some lessons back then. First, don't have one last anti-ship missile in your inventory. They have over 1,000 now. They have small boats. They have a capability. If they want to set fire to the entire Arabian Gulf or / Persian Gulf, they can do it in a matter of hours. That's why Qatar just emptied Udeid Air Base. Qatar, they closed their airspace today. They're expecting to get somebody in Iran is like, hey, you might want to step away from that American base. So Qatar closed their airspace. United Arab Emirates is going to close their airspace today, probably Eastern Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and Bahrain, which means they already know they're all getting hit. And that brings me to my next question, because this is Black Man Spy Podcast. How in the love of Christ did Tulsi Gabbard get to be the director of national intelligence? She didn't even meet the minimum requirements to be a career intelligence professional. She was a congresswoman, a cult leader, a congresswoman, then went into the National Guard and was a reserve officer for a couple of years. And now that she's got that job, now she's being blown off by Trump. So we expect her out. Can you explain what went on with that?
They were all on Fox. Donald Trump, and this is the way I finally have decided to characterize it. Donald Trump hired all spokespeople, but gave them the big job, right? Everyone that he hired would have been a reasonable spokesperson. I could see Tulsi Gabbard being the press secretary or spokesperson for some intelligence service if they wanted it. Pete Hegseth would have been a perfectly reasonable DOD spokesperson. Perfectly reasonable. He's got TV experience. Trump likes the way he looks. He likes his television. He's white. Trump liked white. He's white and male. He's got the demos. I think Pam Bondi, perfectly reasonable if she was the spokesperson for the Justice Department. She's TV friendly. She mainly was on TV when she was the Attorney General of Florida. Her main job as AG in Florida was to go on Fox. She doesn't do a whole lot of litigating, but she does a lot of talking on Fox.
Right.
She's blonde and she's white. Tulsi Gabbard probably could be a good spokesperson. I mean, pretty, also white. And so I think what he was looking for were white people with conservative views who were great spokespeople, because Donald Trump doesn't know anything. He doesn't know anything about running the government. He doesn't know anything about much of anything other than being a television performer. So he had a bunch of people. Dr. Oz. I guess if you wanted a spokesperson for something around health, you could pick Dr. Oz. Lots of people would listen to him because he came from Oprah. But making him in charge of it, in charge of the Medicaid and Medicare services, he doesn't know anything about that. RFK Jr., a nut. Would he be a reasonable person if you wanted to make him the spokesperson for like a federal task force on getting rid of red dye number 3? Okay, I don't like him, but I'd live with that. But he
life
people and made them give them the actual job. Generally, you hire people who know how to do the thing, and then you put the Pete Hegseth to be the spokesperson. And this chick right here, Tulsi, she wasn't even a good congresswoman. She was a backbencher who the Democrats were like, oh, she's too crazy for us. We put her in the front. Even the Democrats, when she was a Democrat, wouldn't put her in the front because they were like, she's a weirdo. But Trump, she's so pretty and so white.
Well, let's be fair here, because I have it on good authority that the first question he asked her, which sealed the job for her, was, did she ever get those puppies, those 101 Dalmatians?
Oh, wait, you're talking about what's her name? Okay, the other one.
Cruella de Vil.
Right. Oh my God, Kristi Noem. Kristi Noem. You know why he hired Kristi Noem? I'm gonna tell you why.
For shooting the dog.
No, I don't think he knew about the dog. Trump does not like dogs. Trump is weird, and that he's the only president who seems to really not like dogs.
Okay, we're making news.
He hired her. I promise you. Yes, because she got the Botox makeover. She got the Mar-a-Lago makeover. So she's got the, she's got the puffy, they pumped the whatever in her lips and pumped the whatever in her cheeks. Yeah,
Botox.
Made her look like all of the women in MAGA. So she got the look. But also remember when she was governor of which Dakota? One of the there only should be one Dakota. I don't know the two of them. Whichever Dakota. He said that they should put Trump's face on Mount Rushmore. Remember that?
Mount Rushmore. Yeah, and she had a mock-up of it done.
Yeah, that's why she got the job. I promise you. I promise you. Because he's Trump. People say that women are emotional. I was just having this conversation with some folks earlier. People try to accuse women of being emotional. No, Trump is the example of the kind of super emotional man who has his mentals aren't engaged. It's all emotion. And so if you make him feel good and make him feel happy and make him feel important, he will give you anything. He's like that dude who sleeps with a pretty girl and then empties his bank account because she slept with him one time. And suddenly he's Stormy Daniels. He's just like, I'm just going to give you a bunch of money. Oh my God, a pretty girl slept with me. Here's some money.
Oh my God.
It's an emotional basket case. And he can't and I think that the reason Bibi was able to play him was, I think your explanation is far more intelligent and reasoned, and you are a person who's an expert. My Trump is an emotional basket case explanation is Bibi said, the Iranians trying to kill you, bro. They're trying to assassinate you. You better get them before they get you, Trump. They're trying to kill you. They're with the libs. They might be woke. He just used emotional shit on Trump because Trump's so easily triggered that I think he triggered him.
Wow, that is a fascinating take. Okay, I've learned so much on this episode, and I'm interviewing you. Okay, we'll talk about Iran on your podcast when you bring me there. But for those of you who are hearing this on Apple or Spotify, every time you hear me go, I'm rolling my eyes because you can't see it, or I'm putting my hands over my face because the things that I don't want to know none of this. Okay, listen, but that brings me now to something I seriously want to talk to you about, and I touched on this with Michael Steele last week, who, by the way, I have personally encouraged to run for chair of the DNC. I think as chair of the DNC, he could wipe the floor with the Republicans, from being an insider there. But he does more on his show, any given show, than I see out of the Democratic National Committee. And when Ken Martin made his statement about David Hogg a couple of weeks ago about he doesn't know if he can do this job, if this, with these pressures of that 25-year-old kid saying naughty and mean things. My first thing, I actually tweeted this. I said, I'll take the fucking job, right? Somebody, for Christ's sakes, get up there and fight. And that's all people really want. The Democratic Party, if I'm not mistaken, is at a 21% approval rating. It could jump to 60 overnight if they all stood up as a body and decided to fight for America and say it. and say, we're going to fight. We're done with this. We're fighting. We're going to hold up everything. Nothing gets done. We're taking you all down. Also, David Hogg was right. Anybody that votes against the party in this existential crisis of America. And as you know, I'm a Philadelphian. I take this founding fathers experiment very personally, very seriously. He was right. We should be primarying people out of existence. People need to understand it's time to pull the Joe Biden. You need to say, hey, I need to step out of the way to save the country. Otherwise, it's all lost. But people seem to think, and Michael said this several times, that this is just politics as usual. It's an unusual brand of politics. And the way I characterized it, I said, well, Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer seem to think that it is incumbent upon them to maintain the dignity of the honor of serving in Congress, and that they should remain a bone china cooling saucer of democracy. And the problem is literal molten lava is being poured onto the bone china saucer cup and is consuming you, your hand, and the rest of American democracy. When exactly is someone going to, well, this isn't my question. I'm getting to a question. I'm getting to an action item for you because my problem is that I'm dealing in national security on one hand. The reason I left Ukraine after my tour with the Ukrainian army was because I saw things were falling apart back here in America. And then they have fallen apart. Done, crash, boom. And, I'm trying very hard to mobilize people for the, I worked with the No Kings protest. But what I'm finding most disturbing, and this is where you, as someone who has power and influence and knows the right people, I'm proposing this because the Democratic Party and those who support American democracy seem to think that regular basic machinations as they've existed for 249 years are going to get us out of this. I have people tell me all the time, 2026, the elections are going to be. I said, forget it. All right. I started a new political action committee. I don't know if you know that, called FAFOPAC, which stands for Focused Action, Focused Objectives, which means we don't do nothing without an action that everyone can do. And you don't do nothing unless it achieves an objective. And right now, my objective was helping turn out that 3.5% of the population. Here's question one for you. Kamala Harris achieved 76.5 million American votes. What in God's name will it take to get half of them? Give me 34 million of them to come into the streets in March. Why do they feel uninvested that they can go out and vote for Kamala Harris and work so hard to save democracy? But the one day that we need them out, right, which was no King's Day, I was living in Spain, so I got that in my head. No King's Day, and now we're going to have another one, right? This is going to be a continuous campaign of marches. But we are literally in an existential crisis. And here's my take on why they're not turning out. Because no Democratic leader will say, go do this. They sit silently. They want to say that they are the opposition, the dignified and an honored opposition, and they will do their work within the halls of power. But with exception of AOC, guys like Malcolm Kenyatta, Maxwell Frost, young bucks, right, stepping up and calling it out and screaming at the top of their lungs. I hear more from Joe Walsh, a former Republican congressman who is now a Democrat, is defending the Democratic Party, but chastising them in a much better way than anyone in Congress is. How can Hakeem Jeffries claim he's from Brooklyn? Did they lose their nerve in Brooklyn? Did he deliver water ice? I mean, why in God's name will this party not stand up and fight? And don't tell me they are. They're not. because it's a sinking ship. They don't feel obliged to want to bail it out or anything, or send off an SOS. It's just like, well, I'm sure we have some deck chairs and a nice orchestra.
I think that the answer to that, as somebody who's been a Democrat and worked both as an observing Democrat, as a voting Democrat, and also having worked in campaign politics a couple of times, including on the Obama campaign briefly and on America Coming Together, which was very grassroots, but George Soros funded attempts to oust George W. Bush because I so deeply was offended by the Iraq War.
Right.
The Democratic Party is not equipped to fight fascism. They're just not. They are a Marquis de Queensberry rules party. They are a rules-based entity, and they have a very slow, methodical way of operating, which is about governing. They're a great governing party. They're
right.
But even with governing, they're a bit. I won't say they're great at governing. They're great at the mechanics of government. They're great at creating Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, Obamacare, Meals on Wheels, Head Start, every progressive thing we have in this country that keeps people from dying poor or dying elderly and broke was created by the Democratic Party because they're very good at creating solutions-based legislation. But the challenge that Democrats have always had, each of those important things has only been able to be enacted when Democrats had their own version of a political strongman, a charismatic leader who could force those things through. FDR, 4-term president, boss man who was like, well, this is getting through. LBJ, asshole, Texas Congress senator who was willing to force members of the United States Senate to listen to him on the crapper while he screamed at them and demanded it. Cut deals that with Republicans saying we will stand down and not oppose your reelection if you go for this bill, but if you don't go for the bill, I'm going to destroy you. Like the Democrat and Obama, who had the charisma and the acumen to be a public advocate for Obamacare in a way that forced it through, and also took advantage of Al Franken getting that seat. And as soon as they got the 60 votes, they jammed that thing through. Pelosi and Harry Reid, who was a brilliant strategist. But Democrats right now don't have that. They don't have a charismatic leader. And Democrats, for whatever reason, need leaders. And the young charismatic leaders like Jasmine Crockett and AOC, they don't want them in the lead because they are a turns-based party. And they're saying it's not their turn. And so therefore they can't be the leader because they also don't follow our rules. And they must, and so because they're so rules-based, they can't fight fascism because they just want to do it within the context of regular politics, as you said, and when you started. They think this is just a very outre form of politics and that they can use regular politics to beat it. You can't. And I just finished reading Jason Stanley's new book. And of course, I just reread How Fascism Works by Jason Stanley.
Right.
Joy Reid was one of our first guests. And what he says, and he makes it very clear, is that to beat fascism, you need a combination of mass protest, as you said.
Right.
A mass protest, people just saying we will not allow this system to continue to function. That's how South Africa achieved freedom, right? You have to say we object and we won't participate in the system. We will shut the system down until you stop, right? It's how Iran overthrew our dictator, the Shah of Iran, that we forced on them. The students, and then to the detriment of Iranian women today, but they said you will not have this dictator over us in 1957. You will not. You overthrew Mossadegh. F you, America. Death to America. I mean, they literally were like, we're going to take out your Shah of Iran and we're going to put in our own government. We don't like it. It's not what we wanted, but it's our fault, right? And so the reality is you need a combination of that, mass protest, and you also need a charismatic leader because unfortunately human beings are like dogs in a way, right? Dogs want alpha to lead them, and it seems that Americans and that people who oppose Trump, they need someone to speak up and that they can rally around, and that person has not emerged other than the Jasmine Crockett's and the AOCs. And I would argue, just me personally, and I can say this because I'm a woman, and a man, and because I think we're still such an old-fashioned society that there have to be some men involved. There are a lot of these dynamic, incredible women who are stepping forward, but you do need at least a guy, right? That's a part of it, because what Democrats are losing are men who Trump makes them feel powerful. And even if
Right.
he's doing them harm, when he's hurting their daughters, hurting their sons, making potentially them have to go to war. Maybe there'll be a draft. We don't know what an Iran war would look like. Even when he's
Hmm.
hurting them, he makes them feel powerful. And
Right.
Democrats, I think the reason those 35 million or 70 million didn't come forward and march on No King's Day is Democrats at this moment feel very powerless. They feel they are in moral and emotional retreat. And I think
Mm.
that Kamala's loss hit people in a way that I think they haven't fully processed. I
Wow.
think people are depressed by it. I think people feel that they can't beat Trump. He seems so all powerful, like he could do whatever he wants. He rolls over the Constitution. He rolls over the Congress. People don't, and telling them that 2026 can fix it and that they can just vote again isn't going to work because they already did that. And so I think Democrats need a different argument. And it's not just Democrats. The Working Families Party exists. There are other people besides
Right.
Democrats. And don't say Jill Stein. That lady is a political cicada.
No, no.
4 years to screw up elections. But Working Families is not like that. They actually partner with Democrats. The reality is Democrats need a message that's simple and coherent as to how we can stop this. How can we stop ICE from snatching people off the street? How can we stop Trump from creating tariffs that make my life even more unaffordable? How can we stop him from sending my son and daughter to war? How can we stop him from putting Confederate names back on the military bases in this country so that we have to, laud traitors every time we speak the name of a United States air base or a United States Army base? How can we stop it? And Democrats need a coherent answer to how can we stop it? What is our plan? And it can't be voting. And how can we inspire you?
Mm.
Inspire you. My former senior producer, Robert Zeliger, keeps telling me to stop liking Lord of the Rings because apparently it's super fascist and it's like a fascist. But what I loved about Lord of the Rings is that it's an army of little, hobbits who are 2 feet
Right.
tall, human
Yeah,
men, wizards, and all sorts of creatures from all around.
well, it's a woke, diverse battle force.
A diverse force that comes together, and they have nothing. They have no weapons that can stop Mordor. They don't have the powers of the other side other than their wizard, but they still come together, but they're inspired. And those speeches, if you watch like Lord of the Rings, the third Lord of the
Right.
Rings, they're some of the most
Mhm.
inspiring speeches that you've ever seen in a movie. Democrats need to give that speech. What is that
Yes.
rallying cry, that message that's going to inspire people to say, we can beat this guy. This guy is not
Right.
unstoppable. He is not a god. Donald Trump is not all powerful. He can be beaten. What is that inspiring message, and who can deliver it in a way that finally gets our side to fight? Because you cannot outlast fascism. You can and must fight it. And you cannot
Well,
beat it without a fight.
I have been making a lot of references to Gondor this week. So, but there isn't going to be a Return of the King that you're going to have to do. I mean, we are up against an army of orcs, right? Singly purposed, one direction, with a few leaders here and there. Which brings me to my last question, and again, an action item. If you know Kamala Harris, you know Barack Obama and Michelle Obama. You've met these people. You could probably communicate with them at will. Perhaps you and
I
I
don't know about
and
the
a couple
Obamas. I don't think the Obamas. Michelle needs to be my best friend. I don't know why she's playing. She's supposed to be my bestie. You better come hang out with me, girl.
oh, well, I think for the sake of American democracy, which, by the way, most of the people that I've been interacting with, Marcus Flowers, Tara Stepmeyer, these other people who have created political action committees, I've noticed they're all Black. And they're really, really angry about what's going on. And they really, really want to save this. And not one of the waffles about, well, I don't, people are treating me badly, which is why the
Yeah.
whole Ken Martin thing rubbed me completely wrong. And I really do think Michael Steele should run for chair of the DNC. He'd win. Or I could run. But my ask here is this. The Republicans meet regularly with CPAC and other major conferences or secret conclaves themselves, and they get their ideological ducks in a row. They communicate, they plan, they strategize. Okay. Are we going to have like a secret Edgartown conference where the high elders of the African American community, and I'm looking at you, Kamala Harris, Barack Obama, Michelle Obama gets together with some of the people who really take this seriously. Me, you, even will invite Eddie Cloud. He's always a voice of reason, right? We'll have one academic. And freaking get these people back out to speak. If I swear to God, I know Barack Obama wants to maintain the dignity. Sorry, my camera's shaking because I'm pounding the table. Wants to maintain the dignity of a former president, right? You know who my favorite president was of all the presidents? It was George Washington. One, because he was a battle commander. Two, he's a battle commander that understood when it was time to turn that shit off and turn governing on and to craft the American experiment. And when he gave his speech at Newburgh, when the army was essentially saying, hey, they're not paying us, so if you get us paid, we'll overthrow Congress and make you a king. Right? I mean, the entire Continental Army was ready to form and make him a king. He pulled out the General Milley speech, the first version of the General Milley speech, which was, we didn't just fight that war to put back into power what this struggle was all about. Even with me, and he did it in a very polite way. I'm flattered that you wanted me to be a king. And he talked them back into common sense. If we need a strong person, why not fucking form the Avengers here, right? Call the Avengers, get us all into one place. I'm willing to go on the ferry out to Edgartown and Martha's Vineyard and meet the Obamas and all the rest of whoever we want the elders to be. And for God's sakes, get a powerful, strong, vocal alliance that says, enough. We have reached our fucking limit. And to say, we're going to combat you on every step, this point onward. We're going to mobilize the nation against you. If we have to shut this country down to save it, we're going to do it. This short of civil war, because you recall my last book was called They Want to Kill Americans. And the they was our Trump supporting neighbors. And now they have a secret police. They literally have a Geheimstaatspolizei, a Gestapo, the ICE out there running around snatching people off the streets with impunity, according to that. When are these senior people, and I'm talking to you, Kamala Harris, I'm talking to you, Barack Obama, I'm talking to you, Mrs. Obama, even though you're not a politician, and Oprah, I'll call you out too. Whoever you are, we've got to form an alliance. And it doesn't require one person to be in charge. It requires literally the Avengers to be, to assemble and to call a dead stop in a massive press conference and harness the energy of the 76 million people that didn't vote for Trump and then the 80 million people who didn't vote at all and explain to them what's going on. Now, I just find it absolutely fascinating that my supposed intelligence-based podcast, I would be talking about Uganda under Idi Amin or Burundi or some other country run by a dictator, the way I have to speak about the United States now. When I flew back from Greenland, which, by the way, I've thrown a monkey wrench into their plans to invade. I got the Danes to arm the country. Another podcast about that. Really, I called the prime minister out on their largest national TV show and said, if I were you, I would put armed troops there as exercises. Well, they arrived last week. We can't seem to do that here. We can't seem to save ourselves here. And when I flew back into JFK, my Nexus didn't work. My global entry didn't work. And I kept thinking, these people are going to start using these systems against us. Peter Thiel, if Trump passes, JD Vance, Peter Thiel, and all the rest of them are going to use everything that we have ever established against us. We're already at the point where they're using a Snowden-like system. They're flying UAV reconnaissance flights over Los Angeles that are doing cell phone collection NSA would never do, but they're using a customs drone to do it, right? When are we going to say this is enough? Or are we just going to go down and I'm going to be the last guy bailing out the boat?
I mean, what I would say to that, and Malcolm, is, when I think about, Poland during its sort of worst years, Lech Walesa was not a politician. He was a labor leader. I think about Russia, and Alexei Navalny was not a politician either. He was a journalist, and he had a media company. Some of them were, Vladimir, that we always had on our show. Karamazov is a politician. Yeah. He's actually a politician. Or you think about Nelson Mandela, who was, the son of a chief. He wasn't a politician at all. And I think that the risk we run is that we count too much on and depend too much on politicians to save us from this mess. It's a version of what the Democrats are doing to expect Barack Obama or Kamala Harris to get us out of this. They are politicians, and their job is to do politics. It is our job as the American people to find ourselves a leader. Dr. King was not a politician, and he created a second American Revolution, and not one led by, all glory or whatever to George Washington, but he did wear his slave's teeth in his mouth.
Yeah, of course.
So I'm not a fan. But when I think about revolutionary leaders like Malcolm X, I think about the Black Panthers. They didn't wait for some politician in California to feed children breakfast. They did it. They gave them food when they knew they were hungry. I think about some of the greatest leaders. I think about Medgar Evers, not a politician. Well, he just understood that the people in the Mississippi Delta needed to feel free. They needed to feel free to speak. They needed to feel free to object. They needed enough food to eat. They needed resources. And so he just provided them. And so I think what we have to do is, I don't think we need to call on Oprah or Obama or Mrs. Obama or Kamala or anyone else to save us. I think we need to look inward in our communities and be our own saviors and figure out in your neighborhood, in your family, on your block, in your Facebook group, in your Instagram group, in your clubs, in your sorority, in your chapter, what are you doing to bring together your group, your friends, your family, to save them from fascism, to teach them how to survive this nightmare? Each of us has to be our own leader, and each of us can be that charismatic leader in our circles. And if we each do that, then eventually I think we will come together. There will be a national movement against this man. He's bankrupting this country. He's going to put us in a war that nobody wants, even MAGA people don't want. And his incompetence, his foolishness, his cartoonishness, his incompetent team, the joke that they are, the embarrassment that they are. No member of the United States military could be proud to stand by Pete Hegseth. He doesn't make any of us feel proud. He's an embarrassment. Tulsi Gabbard is an embarrassment. Kristi Noem is a dog-killing embarrassment. She looks like a clown in her Barbie costume standing in front of half-naked prisoners in El Salvador. These people are kidnappers. They're cruel. They're ugly. They're vicious. They're mean, but they're also stupid. And I think when Americans get good and sick of it, just like every country where there's a dictator and people get tired of it, we will end it. And so the reality is Donald Trump is playing a game with limited time, because the American people are not fools. And even if we are fooled, we are not fools. And eventually each of our little revolutions will be one revolution and he will be done. I just hope that if and when the opposition ever gets control again, they don't make the same mistake for the third time. We should have punished the Confederates. They should have been allowed back into public life after what they did to millions of African people. They should have never been allowed to come back after being traitors. They should have never been able to stand up to get their names on army bases. They should have been punished. And if Donald Trump and his fools are eventually pushed out of power, the Democrats should not be nice. The Democrats should make sure none of them can ever survive an Article 3 of the 14th Amendment refutation of their ability to serve in public office. None of them should ever be allowed to. They should be off of the boards they sit on. They should not be allowed to quietly become college presidents. they should be run out of public life. What they've done to this country is savage. It's wrong. It is an abomination. And we will not, hopefully, make the same mistake twice of Democrats being too nice to deal with fascism the way it should be dealt with.
Well,
and I'll leave it there.
Well, thank you so much for that. I really think that your concept is great. I like the ground level game. We're in long ball, and I think we need to hit a triple. I think we need to hit one right effing now. And I am waiting for the fucking writers of Rohan speech. Okay. And if I got to write it myself, I mean, I've been getting pretty shouty these days. Normally I like to, be the cooling saucer of intelligence, thought, and wisdom. But I've reached my limit as a Philadelphian. I mean, we were there for the No Kings protest, and we did an AM Joy version of a 2-hour show or 3-hour show during the protest with Marcus Flowers, and where we just sat and analyzed what's going on and the things that we're seeing. And as two veterans, we have a completely different take on it.
Right.
However, the things that I do see, I mean, we saw great protests. Everyone's coming out for every protest because people have reached their limit. And that, by the way, is the motto of FAFOPAC, which is "We the people effing dare you." So, I call us the Deadpool of political action committees, right? But we think that people need to get louder. People need to to speak more frankly.
Amen.
And I am certainly of a mind now that I'm looking for those leaders who were leaders to stand up and point out that it's time to move. And that's why I think that Mrs. Harris, if you'd like to call me over. And I think people say this. Oh, one last thing. The African American community in there, we're withdrawing from engaging in this fight. Done. I'm done with that. Okay, you had your little game. Okay, you sat out 2 major protests, and I had a young brother come up to me, and it's on my YouTube channel. And he came up and he goes, "What's the purpose of this?" And I had to explain it to him, and I go, your life, you're wearing black fingernail polish. Your life is in danger. Right? You more than me, because you're young, you're black, and you don't even know why there's 200,000 people on Benjamin Franklin Parkway. And I said, you are standing into danger. You need to engage, and you need to understand that what your way of life, chillaxing, hanging out on 52nd Street, it could be over very quickly, because we're next. Right? We're people of color. They're going for all of them, and they're doing this campaign right now. But I do need to see leaders stand up, and I need to see the African American community stop this game of "we did enough. 92% of the women voted. We're not going to help out in the protests anymore." Now you're playing. What do you think?
I get why African Americans are saying y'all are on your own.
I get it.
We did.
They've had a 6-month vacation.
100%. But this isn't a vacation. I think that people are still processing the loss and the betrayal, quite frankly, of women, of fellow women, white women who still voted for The Handmaid's Tale that will destroy them and their daughters, of Latino men who, by the way, they didn't in majority of Latinos did not vote for Trump. That is not true. It was a percentage of Latino men who did vote in majority for Trump, but certainly none of the undocumented people who are being snatched off the street voted for Trump. They can't vote. And so I too believe that we have to re-engage, but I can understand why Black folks are like, am I going to be in the streets where we're the biggest target? Probably not. But there are other ways to serve, and there are other ways to protest. And so I think Black people have carried the weight, the moral weight of this country since 1619. We've been at the center of every movement for positive change. We're the reason that y'all have free public school. You're welcome. We've done all that we can to make this a moral and better country and to make it a more perfect union. And we are tired. And we're tired of y'all. We're tired of people taking advantage of our movements and then leaving us behind when they achieve what we built for them. We built this country for free. We built you a democracy, and now you don't want to even let us participate in it. And now you want to deport all of the brown people with what? To put us back in the fields? No, thank you. And so I think Black people have a moral commentary to make, including on our allies. And I think white Americans, you guys picked this president. This was your choice. A majority of you, your cousins, your uncles, your family, y'all put him in office. You need to fight him. You need to be out front. You need to put your bodies out front, and you need to let us be the second chair. We will be second chair, but y'all got to be first chair. This is a moral moment, and it's a moral moment, to be honest, for white America, because you all are the only group that has in a majority, including white women, voted for Republicans consistently in every election since the 1960s. You did that because Black people got civil rights. And you now have to reckon with your choices. These were not our choices. Yes, some Black people voted for Trump. Some Black people who didn't pay attention and thought he was funny or whatever, thought they were going to get a check. Yeah, they voted for him. But it was mostly you all. And so it is not our responsibility to morally lead you anymore. We are not your nursemaids. We are not your mama. We're not your auntie. This is not the 60s. We are not going to baby you and carry you anymore. If America wants to be made great, if it wants to be made better, if it wants to be a more perfect union, its majority, its current majority must decide that they've had enough. And I believe that at a certain point, even white Americans who like the idea of maintaining their social status at the top of the pyramid of the United States the United States sort of society, even they at a certain point will be tired of the clown show. And when they're tired of it, like every country in the world, when people get sick of it, they will overthrow this dictatorship. I have full confidence that eventually people will get tired of him, tired of this, tired of MAGA. But it isn't going to be Black people who are responsible. And we will not be held responsible for getting rid of this. You get rid of it. You figure it out, and we'll be there in second chair to support you, because we too do not want to live this way. But by the way, y'all already have us living in Project 2025 in Texas and Arkansas and Tennessee and Texas. You got us living in every red state in Project 2025. We already know what this is, and we know how to survive it. Y'all have to learn how to survive fascism, not us. We already live in fascism because of you.
Yes. Okay. Well, okay. You explained it well.
Thank you, Malcolm. I
agree.
appreciate you having me on your pod.
No one had ever explained it like that. So thank you so much for coming. You know, I love you. I miss you.
Love you,
and if you want to talk you around, you're gonna have to invite me on your podcast, because
let's do it.
I had questions here and you covered them all. So thank you so much.
Thank you, my friend.
And I look forward to seeing you again. Whoa, that was an incredible interview. And I learned so much. You know, the funny thing is, I worked with her for years, but it was always me imparting the data, right? The intelligence data, and watched her for years on MSNBC. When you speak to her, though, it's just really, I get a completely different personal insight. And her insights about JD Vance, if you've got to admit, no one has been telling you these things. So thank you for coming to this week's edition of Black Man Spy. Pick it up. Follow us on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, Substack at malcolmnance.substack.com. I'm on Blue Sky. I'm also doing Chatter now on Blue Sky. That's their version of Twitter Spaces. Occasionally, you'll find me on Twitter/X, pontificating on those spaces. But mainly, you're going to find me right here where you found me. So thank you for coming to this week's edition. Next week's is going to be way more interesting. No, it's not. Nothing's going to be more interesting than what I did today. So thanks. Come back next week and listen and join us on Black Man Spy.